morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are in the world, welcome to Shutter Network. Today we have got an amazing show lined up for you. It's all legal, and not it's all legal in the legal sense. Of course, we hope it's legal. But we have two attorneys here today. We've got Joel and we've got Ben, which are part of my legal team and my legal counsel. And so I really believe they're going to give you some great information today and, of course, some great insight into your businesses and even the challenges you face more than likely as a sole proprietor. And as a small business owner, these are the things we have to be concerned with as we're starting our businesses. And all too often when we're setting up something, right, we get our cameras, we go out there, we start photographing, and we think, it's just a hobby, I'm a weekend warrior. But I'm telling you, all that has to happen is just once someone trips over your bag, they're going to sue you. Just once you lose a memory card or take a blurry image of the bride and her first kiss. There's actually a story running around in the paper right now of a videographer being sued for $200,000 because the bride said the video sucked and therefore ruined her entire wedding. She's suing for $200,000. And guess what, guys? That can happen to any of us, and it's perfectly legal. I can sue you for anything I want to sue you for. Doesn't mean I'm going to win, but I can absolutely make your life miserable. And so today we want to talk about how to protect yourselves, protect your investments, protect your families from this trigger-happy society we live in where everybody just wants to sue everybody for anything they can think of. So we've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about copyright. We're going to talk about trademark. And copyright's been a hot topic here lately with all the thefts going on in our industry and people stealing others' photography, people stealing music, people stealing other people's words. And so, again, these are issues and challenges that face all our businesses. So, great show today. Also, I want to tell you about a giveaway. So today, I need you to get social. I need you to be socially engaged in this conversation, in this episode. We're going to give away a $200 gift card to the BehindTheShutter.com store. So anything you want to apply to, you can. And it's really simple. All you got to do is get social, tweet out or post on our Facebook wall, hashtag Shutter Network, @SalSincata, your aha moments or quotes that have stuck from today's show. And next week, we're going to pick one lucky winner to get that credit to the store. And again, we got a great lineup today for you, and it's all about being legal. So let's keep going. What's new? What's going on in the industry? Not sure if you saw this, but Panasonic just released the GH4. Well, it's not released, they just announced it. And if you're not quite sure what this is, it's a 4K camera. And this is quite incredible, right? So right here, right now, we're using a combination of Panasonic Lumix GH3. We're using the Canon bodies. We do full video in our studio. And the Canon cameras, while good, they produce full HD video, sometimes it can be quite cumbersome, right? Because they're made to be DSLRs first, video cameras second. And not that the GH4 is more geared towards the videographer, but some of the features built into the camera, like follow focus, touchscreen focus, autofocus, so I can just touch the screen on my bride's face and it's going to pull focus automatically. I can have two focus points and just touch and it'll pull focus between those things. These are things that are not easily done on a DSLR, so to speak. But with the GH4, we now have, at an economical price point, access to 4K video. And you might not even be thinking like that, right? Think about it this way. Typical 1080 video will produce a 1 meg file, right? So if you go in and grab one frame out of that video, it's typically about a 1 meg file. Well, now with 4K video, each frame is about 4 meg in size. So it's 4 times the size, 4 times the detail there. Now, I don't have a 4K TV. I would never produce a 4K video, so to speak, okay, unless I was doing something for Discovery or something like that. But the reality is I can now capture in 4K, have all that detail, edit it, color correct it without it falling apart, right? More data is better for post-production. Edit all that and now render it out as a full HD 1080 Blu-ray. So this is the future, and Panasonic is making incredible headway on this because typical 4K cameras are in the $4,000 range. They are promising that this will be sub $2,000 and probably end up in that $1,300 to $1,500 range. So I'm very excited about the promises for 4K video just from a capture perspective. And then, of course, go online, look it up on B&H or something, and you're going to see the footprint of this camera. It's so small, compact, and to be able to produce that quality of video is just absolutely incredible. Also, I want to talk to you about Flixel. Flixel is a new technology, a new company that is out there, and what they're producing is something called a cinematograph. And a cinematograph is basically a picture that has motion to it. And this is an incredible new technology. And if you go look at their site right now, go to Flixel. If you go to their site, you might not be overly impressed at first. And it's easy to understand why. The technology, the way they're explaining it, is not necessarily clear. We're working with them. We're going to be one of the first wedding photographers, I don't want to say in the world, but definitely in the country, who are showcasing this technology and how to use it. So imagine if you walk up to a bridal show, okay, and hopefully you're at the site so you can get a sense of what it looks like. Imagine if one of my brides walks up to a bridal show, and on this big 60-inch TV, I've got this cinematograph displaying. It's going to get them to stop. It's going to get them to talk. It's going to get them to engage. So we're always looking for what's next. Well, I got news for you guys. That's what's next. We have got to go after stuff like that in order to differentiate our businesses and separate our brands from the competition. So go check them out. Now, they are working closely with Panasonic because Panasonic is making this technology or capturing this technology. For example, on the GH3, you can actually capture 60 frames per second at 1080. Canon cannot do that. So on your Canon camera, you've got to drop down to 720 to get 60 frames per second. Why does that matter? Well, at 60 frames per second, you can actually go into slow motion now. And these videos, in order to produce a Flixel cinematograph, is all about dropping things and slowing them down into slow motion. So I promise you're going to be blown away by this technology. And hopefully by the time this airs, I can share with you guys some of the things we've been doing with Flixel. So I want to talk to you about a new book. It's by Brooke Shaden. And Brooke is a very, very inspirational photographer that I'm excited about because, you know, my work day to day, I'm doing wedding photography, senior photography. I don't do a lot of concept shoots. Thank you very much. I don't do a lot of concept shoots. And so from a concept perspective, and this is Brooke's new book, it's Inspiration Photography by Brooke Shaden. So please go check this book out. It's an easy read, lots of pictures. You know, as photographers, we don't want to read words, we want to look at pictures. So a very, very easy read. And what I got out of this book in reading it is just all about concept, right? So what I like to do and what I've done this winter, and I highly suggest you do it, is I've really tried to evolve my style and go after more conceptual type shoots versus just doing the same thing over and over again, right? It gets boring. And so being a wedding photographer, you go to the wedding, you go to the ceremony, you go to the reception, you do your creatives, and you start getting into this rhythm. Well, my personal challenge this year was to go out there and push myself and really push the limits of what I'm doing. So Brooke, great job on the book. Guys, I highly encourage you to read it. All right, so one more time, don't go away. Right after the break, we're going to start driving into some legal concerns you should have, talking about different business entities, talking about copyright. I promise you this show is going to blow you away. Again, get social. We got a $200 free gift card to Behind the Shutter store. We'll be right back after the break.
What would you do with a year of free post-production? At Evolve Edits, we handle the post while you focus on your life, business, and the things that matter most to you. Tell us what you would do with your free year. Take a pic. Tweet it out. Tell us what you would do with a year of your life back. Hashtag WPPI 2014. Hashtag Evolve Edits.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And on today's show, again, we're going to start driving into some legal conversation with the experts we have here today. So you're not just getting legal advice from me. I'm a photographer. I don't want to play a lawyer, on my weekends, right? So we're going to have real attorneys here helping us out. But we're also going to dive into copyright. We're going to dive into business types, and we're going to dive a little bit into trademarks. So let's get going. Copyright. This is a hot topic in our industry right now because a lot of people out there, I find, are extremely ignorant when it comes to understanding copyright and when it's being violated. And that ignorance, unfortunately, is in our own industry. That's what's incredible to me. As photographers, we should be very protective of our copyright, of the images we create, yet there's so much confusion about other artists, music, copy, actual words that are being written, and understanding that we should not be violating other artists' copyright either. But let's get into this. I want to read the actual a legal definition of it because I'll just screw it up if I paraphrase it to you. Copyright, the exclusive legal right given to an originator or an assignee to print, publish, perform, film, or record literary, artistic, or musical material and authorize others to do the same. Copyright protection exists from the moment a work is created in a fixed, tangible form of expression. The copyright immediately becomes the property of the author who created the work. Only the author of those only the author or those deriving their rights through the author can rightfully claim copyright. In the case of works made for hire, meaning someone else has hired you as a corporation, the employer is considered the author. And so that's a very important definition to understand. And right, it's very legal. There's probably more complex definitions of what copyright are, many kind of exceptions to what it means, and we'll talk later about that with Ben later on the show. But here's a translation. Music is copyrighted. Photography is copyrighted. The written word is copyrighted. Stop freaking stealing other people's work. What is wrong with you? And those of you out there, right, because hopefully everybody knows what we're talking about, right? We've had some very high-profile photographers steal or borrow, or they didn't know, they had a friend who did it, the web developer did it. Written word, other photography, and music. Okay, look, we just can't be hypocrites. At the end of the day, we can't get all pissed off because somebody's stealing our photography, but then we're going to go out and do the same thing. And if you don't understand the difference, I'm sorry to break it to you, you sound ignorant. And it's that simple. We are artists. We've got to stick together. We've got to protect the other people's creations, right? I don't want to be a hypocrite. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying on my day-to-day, I try to avoid hypocrisy wherever I can. So educate yourself on this so that you truly understand that when you're going on to these online forums and you don't quite understand what everybody's all up in arms about, you now understand it's illegal. It's that simple. It's 100% illegal. And I do want to give some kudos to the PPA here. If you haven't heard of the PPA, it's the Professional Photographers Association of America. And so the PPA has done a lot of great things to help photographers. They've even got the ability to get access to legal counsel if you're having issues. But right on their website, they have a lot of business and educational, if you're a member, they have a lot of business and legal guidance there for you. And they have put copyright into words, if you will, for the photographers. So let me read some of this from their website. Copyright is a property right. Professional photographers are the smallest of small copyright holders, right? So as a professional photographer, not a lot of us are holding copyright, right? It's typically copy editors, musicians, things like that are filing for copyright, and not so much professional photographers. But here's the thing. Under the Federal Copyright Act of 1976, photographs are protected by copyright from the moment of creation. So the minute you capture that image, there's a little bit of a misnomer out there where people are trying to convince other photographers that you have to go register your image and copyright each individual image. That's just lunacy, right? Last year, between my weddings and seniors and portraits and families, I photographed over 500,000 images. There's no scenario where I'm going out there and copywriting all those individual images. Now, if you're more of a commercial photographer and you're creating iconic images, that might make sense, right? Maybe you're copywriting 10 images a year because they're more iconic in nature and you don't want to risk them being stolen. And a great case in point is the Obama image. When Obama was running for president, there was the Hope poster that came out. And that image was, in fact, stolen, I believe, from an AP photographer. And he sued, and pretty sure he won, because that image was stolen. And so these are the things we have to be concerned about. Photographers have the exclusive right to reproduce their photographs, and, of course, the right to control copies being made of those images. Now, here's the thing. Unless you have permission from the photographer, you can't copy, distribute, no scanning, no sending them to others, publicly display them, no putting them online, or create a derivative work from photographs, meaning, you understand what I mean by a derivative, because that's exactly what happened in the case of Obama. They took that image, altered it, changed colors of it, and then they tried to act like it was a new creation, and that just didn't pass the test on that particular one. The PPA also goes on to say a photographer can easily create over 20,000 separate pieces of intellectual property annually. That's a lot of freaking intellectual property. Professional photographers are dependent on their ability to control the reproduction of the photographs they create, right? Without that, our clients can run rampant. We can give images to our clients, and then they go off and they just do whatever they want with them. That's actually not okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. Of course, it affects our livelihoods and our ability to support our families. This is the one thing we have, right? Everybody's got a camera today. Everybody's a photographer today. Digital images are running rampant all over the internet, all over Facebook. But our copyright is the one thing we have to hang on to, guys. We absolutely have to hang on to it. And so even small levels of infringement, copying a photo without permission, can obviously have huge, devastating impacts on our business. And it's not just about our clients stealing images. It's about other photographers stealing images as well. And I want to share a story with you just on the realities of all this. I feel that as a business, I take the appropriate steps to protect myself. I watermark my images. I make sure I'm not putting full resolution images out there for my clients to steal or print online. One day, I had a friend who was a client. We've all been there, right? Friends who are clients, it's a nightmare. Stay away from friends. Friends are horrible when it comes to being clients. But I had a friend notice the past tense, had, who we photographed the birth of their baby. Okay? And then what happened is I went to their home to do a newborn shoot in their home. And I had previously posted all their pictures from the prenatal session, online for them, all watermarked. I mean giant SCP logo across the entire front of the image. I walk into their home, and I've told this story before. I walk into their home, and what do I see on their mantle is a framed picture stolen from my website with the watermark across the entire center of the image, printed on photocopy paper. They actually the frame was worth more than the actual piece of paper that they put in there. And of course, I have no poker face whatsoever. I walk in, I got my bag on my shoulder, I'm looking there, and I go, it catches my eye, and I go, what is that? And what does the client do? What does my friend do? He goes, man, I knew you were going to see that. I should have taken it down. You should have taken it down. You should have never done it. That's absolutely horrible. You just stole from me. Okay? And that's not okay. And here's a scenario where I've done everything to protect myself. I put the watermark on there. I put low resolution. People just don't care. They are going to find a way to steal from you. In fact, another way they'll do it is you can deliver a high, a full resolution type of image, a printed image, and they're going to take a picture of that image with their iPhone now. And so what can you do? It's just very, very difficult to manage this. But at the end of the day, we've got to do this and protect ourselves. So hopefully that makes sense. Copyright is one of those issues that we all face, one of those challenges we all face. Now, here's the thing. Here's the question you should all naturally have, right? When I give my clients a DVD, do I lose my copyright? And the answer is absolutely not. You do not lose your copyright at all. And here's why. We've already established, federal courts have already established that your copyright is established the minute you make that image, okay? So the minute you click the button, the minute you create that image, you own the copyright. Now, it does change in the situation if I were working for a news organization, let's say, or I was working for, kind of a hired gun. Then at that moment, I don't own that copyright, and more than likely, you've signed a copyright release form releasing yourself of that copyright. But that's a totally different thing, right? Because you're being given compensation for the rights that you've given up, right? It's got to match, right? You can't just give up your copyright and not get anything in return. And so, more than likely, that's not the case. You should have a shared copyright or a copyright release form that you're handing to your clients, which we do. So when we hand over that DVD, okay, we're also giving them a shared copyright so that they have the ability to go print this. In theory, doesn't always happen. When they take that CD of images and they look like professional images and they go to Walmart or Sam's Club should be asking for a copyright release. I've had it happen to me. They're my images. I created them. I'll go to Sam's because I'm printing a marketing flyer or I want to see what something looks like. And when I go there, they ask me for a copyright release of my own images. So I sign a piece of paper releasing myself to my own images. It's kind of entertaining when I go in there. But that should be happening. So you should be giving that to your client. You have not released it. If you're a commercial photographer, and you don't even have to be a commercial photographer, let's say you're a wedding photographer, you've taken a picture of a venue, and now that venue wants to use your image in their marketing and advertising. You should have a limited use rights for that image, right? You don't want to give them that image, and now that image becomes iconic for them. They didn't give you any money for it, and now they use that image in their advertising for the next 10 years. I'm hoping you'll agree that if a hotel decides to use my image for the next 10 years, I should get some form of compensation for that. And that's where you want to give a limited use right to that image. And that could be in the form of 30 days, 60 days, 1 year, whatever you decide on that. But these are the things we have to be concerned about and thinking about. So if nothing else, as it pertains to the subject of copyright, I hope I've gotten you thinking about things, because ultimately you've got to protect yourself, your business, your family, and most importantly, your imagery. So good luck with that. It is a very, very hot topic, and no matter who I talk to about it, everybody gets worked up, right? Because you're dipping into your pocket. Whenever somebody's stealing money from you, or the perception of stealing money, everybody gets really defensive about the whole thing. Let's start talking a little bit about business types. And so, of course, there's many, many different business types that are out there, but my focus today, right now, I want to talk about two different types: sole proprietor and then an S corp. And the reason I picked these two to talk about is because I'm guessing probably about 90% of you out there, 85 to 90% of you, are sole proprietors, right? It just means you're either doing business as, or you're out there no doing business as. You're just doing your business and doing some weekend work and stuff like that, which is fine. That's how we all start. But I want to scare the crap out of you here for a second and hopefully get you to start thinking about making that roughly $800 to $1,200 investment and getting yourself set up as an S-Corp. And the reasons will become crystal clear as we go through this. And then, of course, there's, Joel will be on later, and Joel's going to talk to us about LLCs, LLPs, and there's, a C Corp even. And so there's a host of different organizational types that you can opt for, each with pros and cons. But these are the two, to me, that matter most. These were my options when I was setting up. Let's talk a little bit about sole proprietor. First, a sole proprietor is owned and run by an individual, right? So today, if you go out and you're shooting a wedding on a Saturday and you're collecting $500, $1,000 for that wedding, or you're doing senior shoots and you're taking a couple of $100 here and there, and you're putting it into your personal account, you're more than likely set up as a sole proprietor. And to be set up as a sole proprietor, you don't really do anything unless you file for a DBA, right? DBA is doing business as. And so it could be Sal Sincata doing business as Salvatore Sincata Photography. And where that DBA helps me is maybe if I need business licenses locally, if I want to open up a separate checking account, that's where that DBA helps me. And every state and local government handles DBA a little bit differently. There's usually a small nominal fee to get set up that way. But here's the key. There's no legal distinction between the owner and the business. And that's a very, very important distinction because ultimately you as the owner are responsible for all losses and all debts. Now maybe debts don't scare you as much. But let's say you're at that wedding. Let's say you're with a high school senior at a park, and she's a talented athlete, and you have her doing something really cool, and she trips and falls over a bag, okay? Or somebody at a wedding, grandma, trips and falls over your bag. You are now 100% personally liable. And this has absolutely happened. You can Google on the internet and look for cases that have happened. There was a photographer up in the Seattle area. He photographed a wedding. He's a sole proprietor. Photographed the wedding. And what he delivered, horrifying, all the images he photographed that day. Now, maybe you're not processing what I'm saying. He delivered all the images, good and bad, that he took that day. Now, I don't know about you guys. I think I'm a good photographer. I don't think I'm a great photographer. I take blurry pictures. I take overexposed pictures. I take accidental pictures. I would never, ever give those mistakes to my clients. Every photographer, every artist makes it. He gave all those images to his client. And so, of course, his client is an attorney. And so what his client decided to do, what the attorney decided to do, oh, and by the way, there was no contract between the two of them. So there was no contract limiting liability, right? If I photograph your wedding, you can't sue me for more than you've paid me. In my contracts, we have that. Okay, so we have a liability clause. I can't miss a picture of grandma having a first dance or on the dance floor, and now you come back and sue me for $250,000 because the rest of your life is supposedly ruined. It doesn't matter if it's a frivolous lawsuit or not. It doesn't matter if I win it or not. What ends up happening to me is I now have to make a decision. Do I want to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 defending this, or do I just want to settle out of court for $20,000? Here's what happened in the case of this Seattle photographer. And just Google it. Google Seattle photographer sued for wedding. And this will come up for you. Here's what his wedding client and attorney, who is the wedding client, said to him. Either settle with me for $40,000 or I'm going to sue you for $250,000. The photographer ignored it. He was then sued for $200,000 or $250,000, and now he probably had to pay in that $30,000 range just to defend this lawsuit. And the sad part is if you Google this photographer's name, okay, who I'm not going to share with you, if you Google this photographer's name, the lawsuit comes back. So what doesn't come back is his website. What doesn't come back is his great photography. What comes back is this lawsuit. You tell me, would you hire a photographer that was clearly being sued for producing garbage images? And the whole linchpin in this entire suit, the attorney / groom was showcasing the other photographer's mistakes in camera. Back-focused images, overexposed images, the ones we all make. And so this case is an absolute nightmare for us and one that is easily resolved, right? So it could be resolved both in what you have in your contracts and your limited liability. It could also be resolved from the perspective of if he were set up as an S-Corp, this person, because if he loses the lawsuit, his house is at risk, his cars are at risk, future earnings are at risk. Can you imagine if I lost a lawsuit for $200,000 and now somebody could continue to sue me for my future earnings? That would be devastating to me and my family, all because this person was penny wise, pound foolish, like many of us in this industry, and decided not to incorporate their business. And so The owner receives all the, owner receives all the profits, which from a tax liability is fine, right? The owner's going to get all the profits, and they're reported on their personal income taxes versus corporate income taxes. But you'll see next in an S Corp, there is a better way that will protect you and give you all the benefits of being an S Corp. So let's talk a little bit about an S Corp. The benefits of an S Corp and the benefits of a sole prop, right? So when we start looking at what an S Corp is, you have the benefits of both, right? So from a liability perspective, you've got those benefits of a corporation, meaning they can't pierce the corporate veil. And translation of that is, if I do sue the business, right, Salvatore Sincata Photography is in fact an S Corp. If I do sue the business, I can't reach through the business and then attach to my personal assets. So God forbid something happens. God forbid somebody trips over my bag, or I miss that first kiss of the bride and somebody does sue me. I don't want to be on the hook for $200,000 now and worry about protecting my home, my family, my retirement. I've got to protect myself there. The S Corp gives me that protection. However, a typical corporation, whether you realize this or not, is taxed twice. The corporate entity is taxed once, and then as they pay you as an employee, that money is then taxed again. Well, who wants to be set up for that? That's where the S Corp comes into play. So in S Corp, I'm only taxed once as an individual. So I've got the benefits of being protected from a liability perspective, but I also have the benefits from a tax perspective. I'm only being taxed once. And so some other things, an S Corp can issue shares of stock where an LLC cannot. And again, Joel's going to be here, right? Because some of you may be saying, well, should I set up as an LLC, as an LLP? There's pros and cons to each. You have to think about not only where your business is today, but ultimately where you want your business to go in the future. Because there are pros and cons to each one of these. But setting up a separate corporate entity, whether it's an S Corp, an LLC, these are things that will help protect you in the future. So I hope that all makes a lot of sense to you. This is confusing stuff. Watch this episode over and over again. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is protect you legally and protect your copyright. These are important concepts for us. Let's go into trademark for a second. Trademark is something I would guarantee 99% of photographers just don't think about at all. If you're a graphic designer, you're thinking about it. If you're a big corporation, you're thinking about it. But mostly photographers don't see what they're doing and think about it from a trademark perspective, right? Because you're not going to trademark your image. You're usually trademarking a symbol, a word, words legally registered, and that's where you're going to see that R, right? And so you can trademark a tagline. So if you come up with a tagline, right, you're going to want to trademark that. And trademark can be an expensive proposition. So you're not going to trademark every tagline you come up with, right? It's just not economical. But for example, when we talk about marks, I always talk about Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, the LV, is a registered trademark. That LV is actually a protected mark for them. So you can't just go around using the LV mark. And I will call attention, if you see an album company that's producing a Louis Vuitton-inspired album, that's actually an illegal album. They're actually violating trademark law. And so at the end of the day, it's just, once again, complete ignorance and disrespect to the creative industry. And, I don't want to be part of something like that. I want to ensure that my business is operating as ethically as it possibly can. And I want to protect other creatives out there because I'm one of them. And I would want somebody giving me and my business the same respect. So keep that in mind. But let's keep going. I want you to think about your business photography. And we're going to make one up here. One I call Fat Cat Photography. Okay, so let's say your business name is Fat Cat Photography. And your tagline is, "You pose, we pounce." Okay, so let's say that's the case, right? Don't go stealing my stuff. It's not trademarked, but there's potential there for Fat Cat Photography. But if indeed you were to have Fat Cat Photography, "You pose, we pounce," you would want to look at trademarking "You pose, we pounce," right? Things like that you want to look at taking to that next level and protecting, because it is part of your business identity. It becomes part of your brand. It becomes part of the recognition. You wouldn't want a competitor to come along with the same name, with the same tagline, and create confusion in the marketplace. And that's the most important thing to understand, is that level of confusion that will get created. And there is a sniff test that, or a bar that has to be passed in order for your mark, right, to be registered. And Joel and Ben will be on later talking to us about that and give us a little bit of clarity there. All right. So I know that was a lot of information. We just did a massive, massive brain dump on you for this. And legal stuff isn't always sexy. It isn't always exciting, but it is something that affects us every single day of our lives. And as our business has grown, the legal perspective of it, I've had to think about, plan for, put a strategy together for. I've had to ensure I have partnership with legal counsel. And you'll meet Joel. He's been my attorney for probably damn near 6-7 years now. And so you've got to have people around you that you can trust. And people that are going to give you the right advice. And it's not always the advice you want to hear, but you at least got to be open to hearing it to get you in the right, going in the right direction. So don't go away, because after the break, we are going to have Joel and Ben on here to really dig into this a little more. I'm going to start asking a lot of questions from a photography perspective to really get them thinking differently and to get you thinking differently about what those answers are. You might be surprised at what you hear. But don't forget, I need you to get social, guys. I want you to tweet. Or go to our Facebook site, so at Sal Cincotta, or visit facebook.com BT Shutter, hashtag Shutter Network. I want to hear your aha moment or quotes that have stuck out of this episode. And of course, we've got a $200 gift certificate available for the winner next week from BehindTheShutter.com. Don't go away. We'll be right back after the break.
Animoto. It's more than just a slideshow. Get $55 off 1 year of Animoto Pro by using code SHUTTERMARCH. Visit Animoto.com for more info.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And we are here with Joel and Ben. And right now, these are real attorneys. They didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn last night, so they actually know what they're talking about. So take their advice and listen to what they're telling you, because this impacts all of us, our industry and our livelihoods. Joel, Ben, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Sal. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so before we get going, just kind of introduce yourselves, your name, what you do, what your area of expertise is, and the company you work for.
Sure. My name's Joel Green. I am an attorney mostly in the St. Louis, Missouri, and O'Fallon, Illinois area. Licensed in Missouri and in Illinois. Work with Sandberg, Phoenix, and Von Gontard, which is a larger regional firm in the St. Louis metropolitan area with offices in southern Illinois. Been with them for a little over 3 years, been representing Sal and his various entities for, like you said earlier, about 7 years.
It's hard to believe 7 years has gone by.
It's fun to look back at where we started and where you are now, and all the different developments you've made along the way.
And the challenges, the challenges that we have faced as we've grown. You know, when we started out, obviously the challenges I faced are completely different than what we face
your
today.
issues were a lot easier back then.
Yes, it wasn't. There's so much gray area. I am a horrible person when you give me gray area. You know, you and I laugh all the time, and you're like, "Well, you could do this, you could do this," and it's just it's craziness. I just need black, white.
And unfortunately, you will probably never get that answer from me or from any other attorney, because there is no black or white.
Fair enough.
Everything is in the in-between. My practice is such that it's focused largely on small businesses like yours. Entrepreneurials like you, where we try and counsel and strategically give advice to clients on business development issues, formation issues, liability protections, anything, contract issues, anything really that would come into play when we're looking at a business versus an individual and trying to make sure to marry the two together and protect, as you mentioned earlier, ultimately to protect an individual's assets from business risks. That's the end of the game, and what we're trying to accomplish is to make sure you guys succeed not only in your businesses, but that that success doesn't translate into unnecessary risk at the individual level.
Of course, and that is a big part of what I was talking about earlier. Ben, yourself.
My name is Ben Haltenoff, also at Sandberg, Phoenix, and Von Gontard, and what you failed to point out, Joel, is now we're in Kansas as well. So
we are in Kansas.
You can't forget about that. So
there's growth in the Midwest.
There is. That's exactly it. As Joel said. It's a regional firm, but we have a national reach as well. So I do what Joel does. I advise small businesses. I try to help out from formation to sale or anything associated with that. I also have. I spent time down in Nashville, Tennessee, so I have a little bit of an intellectual property background. So whether that be copyright, trademark, anything in between, when you're around that much music, it's kind of in your blood at some point.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that when we were talking earlier. You're down in the Nashville area. I mean, it's just music all the time. I live there. I did a short stint in Cool Spring, Tennessee, and right outside Nashville. I loved it down there. It's just very artsy music, but being an Italian New Yorker in Tennessee did not do well for me. It wasn't
I
good.
can't imagine why.
Yeah, exactly. And your focus area is?
Just general business as well as intellectual property, pretty much run the gamut. No patent work, but trademark, copyright, all of that.
And we're going to have fun talking today because that is part of the biggest challenge in my industry. So what I really want to do is just start off with a few questions that we've gotten from our audience and questions I have that I think will further the discussion. Let's start with you, Ben. Okay. What steps can photographers take to protect their images? And we've heard all sorts of things, and we were talking on the break on register each individual image. But what steps can photographers take to protect their copyright?
Your best step is to put a watermark on everything. I mean, the reality of the internet and the reality of the way that society works today is once it's on the internet, it's out there forever. So if you put an image out there, a beautiful image that you're super proud of, you don't put a watermark up there, someone takes it, puts it on their website, it's gone forever. You're going to have to track it down, you're going to have to find it, you're going to have to find all the people that are using it inappropriately. It's going to be a pain. There's no question about that. So your first real big issue is to put a watermark on that makes it, everyone realize that it's your mark. Don't put something in the bottom little corner of it that says, copyright Sal Cincotta 2014. Put it across the middle of the image because at the end of the day, you know as well as I do that it's easy to crop something. It's easy to take somebody's name off something.
Well, let's role play with that for a second because I like where you're going and I got a couple of questions about it. I don't put my watermark across the middle of the image. Aesthetically, it ruins the image, right? And here's the challenge for us as creatives. The reason I'm putting my image online is to get new business. And if I kind of mark up the image, yes, I've protected my copyright, but the reality is I'm probably going to go out of business soon, so my copyright is irrelevant because I'm not going to be able to generate new business when it says Sal Cincotta across my bride's eyeball. So I do put it in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, I think I agree with you in the sense that if somebody just crops it out, it's now gone forever. And my thought is always, if somebody wants to rip you off, they're going to figure out a way to rip you off no matter what, whether it's a screenshot or something like that. Even clients ordering, I find that they have a challenge ordering when they see a giant mark across the center of the image. But let me expand on my question. Let's say we put our mark on the bottom of the image, and it is in fact cropped out, and then somebody violates that, right? What's my recourse then? Is it the same? Meaning, who's liable in this case, right? So we're role playing now, right? Okay. Person A, we're like back in college. Person A crops the image and removes my mark. Mm-hmm. But now person B actually steals from person A and is using the non-watermarked image on their site because they stole it from person A. Can I now sue A and B?
You can absolutely go after both. They're both using your copyrighted image.
So person B can't claim, because this is where I'm going with this. Person B can't claim, well, the image had no mark on it. We thought it wasn't copyrighted.
Right, and that's the big thing on the internet today is you run into blogs that people say, oh, here's this beautiful image I see, I'm going to throw it on my blog and talk about it, or even pictures of clothing that people take. Those are copyrighted images no matter where they came from. The thing that people always say on the internet is, well, if I give a little note to where I stole it from, oh, you're fine. That's not the case.
Oh, I love this. This is a great conversation. So you mean I can't just merely give a nod and say, hey, I borrowed this from, and now it's okay, right?
Absolutely not, because they may not have the rights to use that image in the first place. And even if they have the rights, that doesn't necessarily mean you do, unless there are certain situations out there where you might give a license and you might give a broader license even than you want to that might give people the right to do something like that. But as a general rule, no, they can't do that. They can't take that image and start displaying it as their own, especially in any type of commercial field is really where you start getting really dangerous.
And what I love is, I love my fellow photographer. That's what, shows like this are all about, is educating them and helping them. But the level of ignorance as it pertains to understanding copyright in my image is like, it's just cancerous. Because they don't quite get that. You can't just borrow my image, my written word, my music, and just give credit to, hey, borrow this from. It's illegal. It just doesn't pass the test. But let's go a little bit further with this, man. When we're talking about Facebook, for example, or it's not only Facebook, it's Instagram, it's on and on and on, all these social media sites, and I agree to the terms and conditions, and I now upload my images for my client, and they end up on Facebook, and it has a watermark on it. What am I ultimately agreeing to when I put that image up there?
It's going to depend specifically on those terms and conditions. And I haven't admittedly read Facebook's recently, but I know that about a year ago, there was a big update of their terms and conditions that basically gave them a free license to use your image that you uploaded anywhere on their site. And if you're agreeing to that, if you're agreeing to those terms and conditions, you're out of luck. That's what you've agreed to. Now,
even if my mark's on that image.
And they should have to reproduce it with that watermark on it, which for Facebook most of the time is going to say, well, as you said, it's not as aesthetically pleasing. I don't necessarily want to use that, but they have the right to use that because you've granted them that license to use it in that limited circumstance of, well, I don't think Facebook's a very limited circumstance generally, but in the limited circumstance that is that large website.
Yeah, and that to me is also a challenge because as social media continues to grow, it's very prevalent in my industry, right? We can't get away from social media. I mean, you're watching my team. We were laughing on one of the breaks. You know, we're on our phones. We're Instagramming. We're Facebooking, all while things are going on. And that is the life of a photographer today. It's all about being out there engaged. And I don't mind so much if somebody steals one of my iPhone pictures, right? If I'm out like, hey, here we are in, you know, whatever national park. I mind and I don't mind, but I definitely mind to think that they might use one of my images for a national campaign. Now, it's never happened to me to date. I don't really know of anybody where it's happened, but I've watched these sites like Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram have to come back off their terms and conditions because there were some new updates where it was like they could use it for a national campaign, and people lost their mind with that. So that's really, really interesting. So it sounds like even if I use my mark, I will maybe mitigate where it will be used because I don't think Facebook wants to use an image as my mark.
And that's exactly it. It's not that you don't have the ownership of that copyright anymore. You still have the copyright to that image. It's that you've given Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, I think TwitPic is actually what you're actually giving the license to. You're giving them the license to use it, you know, within that platform. So someone can retweet your photo, for example.
Right.
And that way Twitter doesn't get in trouble if, you know, you post something and 50 million people retweet it. And
that makes sense, right?
Exactly.
Their attorneys, their legal team are worried about the same things. They don't want them to get sued because somebody retweeted it, and now, you know, they're now suddenly liable because they own the platform that has allowed this sharing of the copyright material.
It goes back to your point of, you know, if person A takes away the little copyright in the corner and person B uses it, that's that exact same situation.
And actually expanding upon that, Ben, person A in this situation would be Facebook, and we can all agree that the terms and conditions we've granted them the right for Facebook to use it. I don't believe the same would extend by their terms and conditions to individual users and members of Facebook. They cannot take it and copy it and legally use it based on Facebook's terms and conditions.
Right.
So the end user there, call it person B, will still be in violation of your copyright.
Right, that's a very good point.
Yeah, so they can't do the cropping and the cutting and the pasting and using it, certainly not in a situation where they're going to be using it for commercial use.
Right, so some knucklehead can't go on to my Facebook page as an end user, go, ooh, I like this picture. Well, Sal, you decided to share it
you clicked that box.
You clicked yes, you agreed to put this on social media, therefore you gave up your copyright. No, that doesn't fly, right? I still, as the creator, still own the copyright. Now, Ben, expand on this for me because when I was teaching earlier in the segment, I said the copyright is created the moment you click, you know, the shutter, and you on the break you said yes, but no. So expand on that for everybody.
The reality and the technicality of it is there has to be some level of publication for copyright the protection to really come into effect. Now, for photographs and for music and for anything like that, of course it has to, because how's someone going to...
How can somebody steal something that hasn't been published?
Exactly,
right?
And that's impossible. So that's a very technical situation, but the reality is it has to be published in some way. It has to be out there. You know, it can't just be sitting on your hard drive and never be seen again, because there can be any number of issues, especially when you come to music, for example. You know, if someone creates one song and it sits on their hard drive and is never used and no one ever sees it, and then someone does the exact same song just out of chance, there's no copyright infringement there because there's no publication there. There's no notice that that's out there. If that gets out to any number of people, then you're going to have more of an issue.
Right, and that makes sense. It was just, I like that, you know, you came to me and you said, hey, there's a little bit of a nuance here, and it's important. I think knowledge is power. for us as business owners to, no matter how small it is really understand these subtleties in what we're doing. I do want to switch gears here for a second. I want to start talking about legal entities for a second. So, I talked about an S Corp, and we are obviously an S Corp and a sole proprietor. What are some of the challenges you see today when you're dealing with small business owners in your day-to-day when it comes to these legal entities?
Actually, there's more than just a sole proprietor and more than just an S corp. And you alluded to it a little bit earlier with the world of limited liability partnerships and limited liability companies. And I would even add to that list that unique to the photography industry is the hobbyist, because most, if not all, professional photographers probably started as a hobbyist when they picked up their camera and realized that, hey, I actually like this thing.
It's probably about how 90% of us.
I can make some decent photography out of it and maybe make some money. So in the world of entities and business organizations, I would actually go all the way back to the origin and start as a hobbyist. As a hobbyist, you're taking the pleasure and the passion, and you're taking the photography really for the organic reasons. You get to a point where you're starting to make some money, you're starting to see a market develop for it, you're getting a brand, you're getting an image. Then you start needing to make some decisions. Okay, am I going to do this full time? Am I really going to commit to this? And that's when you start getting into the situation of the DBAs, the sole proprietorships. I always, at a minimum, anybody out there that's not already registered as a DBA, if you're not going to go to the next step of forming an entity, at least get the DBA, because that's going to give you the opportunity to take advantage of some of the tax considerations. Get a DBA, get a separate checking account, start to create some of the differentiations between your business interests and your personal interests.
Well, and just so we're clear, I would say probably 90% or more of the people who've gotten started as photographers, in our industry we have a little acronym for them. They call them MWACs. Moms with cameras. And so that's how they got started, right? So they were photographing their kids. They got this new digital SLR. Their friend goes, "Oh my God, you're a great photographer. Take pictures of my kids. Take pictures of my wedding," right? And all of a sudden, they're not that there's anything wrong with them. It's just it is the path. It has been the path. So now they're thrust into this business with zero business understanding.
Right. So that's that transition from hobbyist to, business and professional.
But let me tee up this question. What is the transitional mark? Because I guarantee everybody's watching out there and they go, "Oh, well, I only do a couple of weddings a year. I only do." When is the point that they should look at going from a hobbyist, right? Which to me, let's call it, I'm a sole proprietor if I'm a hobbyist, right? When do I make that move and go, I need to treat this as a business? And is it driven by money? Is it driven by how busy you are? When do I make that transition to an S Corp or LLC?
So there's lots of considerations. One is money. I mean, obviously, the more money you're making, the more liability you're going to be attracting to yourself. To the extent that you're actually generating revenues, the IRS is going to have an interest in making sure that you're paying and reporting your taxes.
I can do all that as a sole prop.
You can do all of that as a sole prop, no question. As a sole prop, you also have the ability to take some deductions directly through on your Schedule C. What you don't get as a sole proprietor is any liability protection. So the more business you start to have, the more exposure you have to the general public, the more likely you are to find yourself in a situation where you may have some unwanted liability.
Just like the case we talked about in Seattle.
There's any number of those. You've got the Seattle case. You mentioned it, I think, earlier about the tripping over a camera bag. You got, doing your seniors, for example. I mean, we're in the middle of a very nasty winter here in St. Louis, and if you take one of your seniors out who wants to have an outside shot right now, there's a real good chance you're going to walk across a lot of ice on a bridge to get to the woods.
Slip and fall.
And if you slip and fall on that bridge, you've opened yourself up to liability.
Well, and we've even, talking about my personal situation, and I think any studio owners out there really need to pay attention to this. We've taken that extra step in that our building, our facility, our studio is owned by a separate entity, not owned by Salvatore Cincotta Photography. And the way that protects us is how?
Oh, that's huge. And that would be, what I would kind of call tiered entity structures. It's a much more advanced state of asset protection. But ultimately, you're shifting the burden from Salvatore Cincotta Photography to the entity that owns the building that we're sitting in
Right.
for liability purposes. So if there's a slip and fall in this building, theoretically, done appropriately, the liability would be limited to the assets of the building.
Right.
Not even to the extent of the assets of Salvatore Sincata Photography, and certainly not to the assets of Salvatore Sincata individually.
Right. So
we've gone to those extraordinary measures to do that with each of your other individual companies as well, to make sure that we're shielding you personally and your partners personally to the extent that we can, so that there's a huge limitation on liability at the individual level.
Yeah, and for me, I'm very appreciative of that, because I understand, and I feel like we're in a very litigious society right now, and anyone can sue anyone for anything. And so I don't want to run the risk of, first of all, I never want anything bad to happen to anyone, right? I mean, that's never any business owner's goal. But we also live in a world where we understand bad things happen. Someone can trip over my bag. Someone can slip out on the sidewalk. I mean, we had 15 inches of snow here a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and what if somebody fell outside walking into my studio? I don't want to lose everything I have, right? And that's what I think everybody out there has to get through their heads. You've got to protect your family, your livelihood, your futures.
And there's a couple ways to do that. You know, we've alluded to it. You mentioned it earlier from the entity standpoint. So we've discussed very briefly the sole proprietorship, and it's a fine way to be able to track some income and expenses, but you're not getting the liability protections. The easy solution to that is to form an entity. You mentioned S corporations. You talked a little bit about the C corp and the limited liability companies. An LLP, which is a limited liability partnership, is only appropriate when there's multiple members. I'm not going to go into that today, because I don't think that the vast majority of the audience is really having partnerships interests involved. Most of them are probably operating as sole proprietors or as individual
Husband
owners.
and wife team.
Husband and wife, but you can accomplish the same thing through a single member LLC. No need to do a partnership on a marital interest.
Is there any scenario, sorry to cut you off here, what are the benefits of going LLC versus S Corp?
So that was the direction I was going to go. And state specific, number one. In Missouri, it's a different analysis than in Illinois. In Missouri, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to counsel most clients to go with an LLC for no other reason than cost.
Interesting.
Missouri is a very, very cheap state when it comes to taxing the formation of the companies and the ongoing maintenance requirements of a limited liability company as opposed to an S corp.
Gotcha.
In Illinois, the exact opposite's true. There may be very good reasons to do an LLC over an S corp in Illinois, but the cost is very prohibitive. The Illinois has recognized that LLCs are a preferred entity of choice for a lot of attorneys and a lot of accountants, and really heavily tax them on an initial formation basis.
So just the setup fees.
For the initial setup, but then in Illinois you got to pay very large annual maintenance fees or annual report fees as well. That's absent in Missouri. The corporate formalities are really the difference between the two. They both have a flow through taxation.